I still remember that morning clearly, a cold Tuesday in mid-February in San Francisco. The air inside the 27th floor conference room of Vista Dynamics was heavy, thick with the scent of stale coffee and sales pressure. I was presenting the quarterly report, profits up 37% from last year, growth charts rising, every sentence rehearsed down to the comma. I thought that at least today, Nathan Cole would have to acknowledge the team's effort. But as soon as I finished the line, "This is the highest growth quarter in 3 years," the conference room door swung open. Heavy footsteps echoed. Nathan walked in without knocking, without greeting, wearing that self-satisfied expression and eyes cold as steel. The entire room fell silent, and even the tapping pens stopped. He set a folder down on the table and spoke in a dry voice, like reading a memo. "We need to talk, here and now." I straightened my back and met his gaze calmly. I knew this was never a good sign, especially when Nathan looked like a man preparing for a performance of power. I offered him a seat, but he stayed standing, leaning slightly toward me. The move was both threatening and condescending. "The board has decided to restructure the strategy division," Nathan said. "We need people with vision, people who do more than track spreadsheets." He glanced at me. One look was enough for everyone to understand who he meant. I asked, "What exactly do you mean, Nathan?" He smiled, the familiar smile of someone who had already won before the match began. "No need for drama, Amelia. The decision's been made. You'll step down from your current role, effective immediately." I heard small whispers around the table. One of my team members, Harper, widened her eyes. She knew how absurd this was. We had just secured the biggest contract of the year, but no one dared to speak. In Nathan's world, resistance only amused him. I took a deep breath, looked straight at him, and asked, just to hear it from his own mouth, "Are you firing me?" He nodded, his eyes as if I were an extra number in a balance sheet. "You lack vision," Nathan said. "You manage work, not people, and frankly, this industry needs real strength." He didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood the subtext. In his mind, real strength meant masculinity, command, loud voices, empty confidence. And me, in his eyes, I was the careful, composed woman, too calm to be seen as a leader. I said nothing more. I didn't need to. Any argument would only make him feel right. I gathered my files, closed my laptop, stood up, and said slowly, "Thank you for the clarity, Nathan." He froze for a split second, surprised by how calm I was. "You'll need to turn in your badge and laptop before 5, he said, then walked out of the conference room like a man finishing a hunt. I sat there for a few seconds, feeling the stares around me. Some were pitying, some afraid, some avoided my eyes as if termination were contagious. I just smiled, faintly, packed my things, and left the room. The door closed behind me, the dry click sounding like a full stop at the end of a 15-year chapter with that company. I went straight down to the lobby. Outside, rain was falling. San Francisco rain, steady, cold, carrying a faint scent of salt. I stood by the glass, watching my reflection blur among the raindrops and car lights. No tears, no rage, only a strange sensation, relief. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from meaningless meetings, empty compliments, and judgmental stares. As I walked away, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from an unknown number, just 2 words. "It's time." I looked at it, frowning slightly. I knew exactly who sent it. Henry Voss, my father's lawyer. The man who once told me that one day I'd understand why my father always said, "Wait for the right moment." I tightened my grip on the phone and looked up at the glowing tower above. Nathan thought he had ended my career. He didn't know he had just opened the most interesting chapter of this story. I sat in my small apartment, watching the San Francisco lights spill through the window. The day had been long, fired, humiliated, but strangely, I felt no anger, only clarity, and one unmistakable feeling. This was just the beginning. I smiled faintly and took a sip of wine. If you're listening to this story, tell me where you are right now. Maybe on your way home, or sitting quietly in your own room. Have you ever been underestimated, dismissed just because someone decided you weren't good enough? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. And if you enjoy stories of powerful comebacks, smart reversals, and quiet justice, don't forget to hit follow. Because trust me, the next chapter is where everything truly begins. I drove toward the financial district as the clock neared 9 at night. The rain had stopped, but the damp chill still lingered over the cobblestone streets. Henry Voss's office was on the 12th floor of an old building where the hallway lights were always dim and the air smelled of old paper, mixed with worn leather from aging case files. I hadn't seen Henry in nearly 3 years, not since the day he finalized the last of my father's legal affairs. He opened the door before I could knock. "I figured you'd come tonight," he said in that calm, deep voice I remembered. I stepped inside, still drenched, my hair damp with rain. His office looked the same: shelves packed with documents, the pendulum clock ticking steadily, and in the corner, an old steel safe. He gestured for me to sit, then walked straight to it. I heard the click of keys turning, followed by the heavy sound of metal unlocking. He took out an ivory envelope sealed with red wax. The handwriting across the front made my heart tighten. "This is from your father," he said, placing it in front of me. He left very clear instructions. "This envelope is to be opened only when you turn 32. I stared at it for a moment, feeling the air in the room grow dense. "Today is my birthday," I whispered. Henry nodded. "I know." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were two things: a letter and a stack of legal documents. I unfolded the letter first. My father's handwriting was sharp and steady, every stroke carrying his unmistakable presence. "Amelia, if you're reading this, you've learned by now that the working world is never fair. You've spent your youth proving yourself in a system designed not to see you. I've been watching, even from afar. I know you've worked harder than anyone, but that's never been enough. You need something else: the power to create change, not just survive it. By the time you read this, you will hold 90% ownership of Vista Dynamics. These shares are kept in a trust I established after leaving the company. You have full authority from this moment on." I read it 3 times. Each word felt like electricity running through my veins. 90%. I could hardly believe it. Henry handed me the second set of documents, certified copies of the transfer papers, all signed, sealed, and legally binding. "Why didn't my father tell me this before?" I asked. Henry leaned back in his chair, speaking slowly. "He once said you needed to understand the world before holding it in your hands. He wanted you to know what it felt like to be underestimated, so you'd never repeat the mistakes of those who disappointed him." I sat quietly, eyes drifting toward the window. The city outside glowed, every light reflecting off the glass like 1,000 eyes watching. I remembered the morning Nathan fired me, the arrogance in his tone, the condescension in his stare. And I realized my father had been right all along. Men like Nathan were the very reason he built this trust. Henry placed his hand on the desk. "No one knows about this fund except me, Amelia, not even the board. They all believe your father sold his shares 10 years ago." I looked up, my voice steady. "If I reveal this now, they'll turn against me." Henry nodded. "They will. And they have Nathan. He controls the board through fear, not faith." I drew a deep breath, eyes still fixed on the paper. My name stood clearly beneath the line: legal and sole owner of Vista Dynamics. A strange mix of pride and chill ran through me. Power was never what I sought, yet there it was in my hands, heavy, deliberate, like a sword my father had forged long ago. "I need time," I said. "Of course," Henry replied, pausing for a moment. "But not too long. A man like Nathan doesn't stop because he thinks he's won. He'll try to erase your name from the company entirely. And when that happens, it'll be harder to fight back." I smiled faintly. "Then let him feel safe for a while. Sometimes the best way to bring down the arrogant is to let them believe they're untouchable." Henry looked at me, pride and worry flickering in his eyes. "You really are Edward's daughter." I folded the letter and slipped it carefully into my coat pocket. As I stood, Henry asked quietly, "What will you do next?" I turned back, my voice calm but resolute. "I'll let them think they've won, and when the time comes, I'll show them who really runs this company." On my way out, I stopped before the glass door. The reflection staring back at me was of a woman I barely recognized, her eyes cold, steady, and full of intent. I knew then that nothing from this point forward would ever be the same. I stepped out onto the street. The night wind carried the scent of salt from the bay. I pulled out my phone and opened Henry's last message. It's time. This time, I typed 3 words in return. Not yet, Henry. Not yet. Then I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked up at the misty sky. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I could almost hear my father's voice. Wait for the right moment, my girl. I smiled softly and walked through the quiet San Francisco night, knowing that the dawn ahead would not be like any other. I drove back to my apartment in the Mission District as the clock neared midnight. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of the city through the window. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the sofa, opened my laptop, and logged into my company email. My account had been locked, just as Nathan had announced. But I knew other ways in. 4 years working alongside the engineering team had taught me this system better than anyone, and on an old hard drive, I still had copies of data from the projects Nathan had, temporarily suspended for his own reasons. I pulled up the original reports and compared them with the official ones on the internal site. The discrepancies were obvious. Some figures had been altered. The previous quarter's revenue had been inflated by nearly 20%. This wasn't a typo. It was deliberate manipulation. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the cold rows of numbers on the screen. Something bigger was happening, and Nathan was hiding it. The next morning, I got a call from Maya Chen, a young finance employee I'd mentored when she first joined. Her voice was small, trembling. Amelia, I don't know if I should tell you this, but last night I overheard Nathan talking to the CFO. They're preparing to sell the company. I froze. Sell Vista? Yes, to a corporation called Vectra. I think they plan to finalize it within a few weeks. But something's wrong. The numbers they're showing the buyers don't match the real data. I could hear Maya's anxious breathing on the line. I asked quietly, "Can you get the documents to prove it?" She paused for several seconds before saying, "I'll try. But if they find out, I'll lose my job," I said slowly. "Be careful, Maya. Don't let anyone suspect. You already did the right thing." When she hung up, I sat there for a long time. Henry's voice echoed in my mind. A man like Nathan doesn't stop just because he thinks he's won. Now I understood exactly how right he was. That afternoon, the news broke across the market. Vista Dynamics was being acquired by Vectra in a deal valued near $1 billion. The press hailed Nathan as a visionary innovator of Silicon Valley. I looked at his photo on the screen, tailored suit, triumphant smile, and remembered the faces of the engineers he'd laid off in the name of cost optimization. None of the articles mentioned them. None mentioned the people behind the ideas that had built the company. That evening, I met Henry at a small cafe near the Embarcadero. He read the headline on his phone, then looked at me. He's sprinting toward the finish line. A deal like that can't close without shareholder approval. You know what you're holding, don't you? I nodded. I know. But if I show my hand now, they'll think I'm trying to sabotage the merger. I need evidence. I need to prove his fraud. Henry set down his cup. And how will you do that? I said. I still have a few people inside I can trust. I'll start with them. 3 days later, I called Harper Lynn, the former HR director and my closest friend at Vista. Nathan had once forced her to sign off on documents that buried employee complaints. When I said I needed to meet, she was silent for a long time before agreeing. We met at a small diner on the south side of the city. She glanced around before speaking. He's cleaning house. Files are disappearing fast. I asked, "Do you still have any copies?" Harper nodded. "I have a drive, but if I give it to you, I can't go back." I looked at her and said quietly, "Then don't do it for me. Do it for my father, for the company he built, for the people they call disposable." Harper stared at me for a long time, then finally nodded. That night, I received an email with no subject line, just one attachment. When I opened it, hundreds of internal reports filled the screen. Hidden expenses, special consulting funds, executive bonuses. Nathan's signature was on several of them. I exhaled slowly, my chest tight knit with mixed emotions. Part of me was angry. Another part was deeply sad. Nathan used to have vision. When he joined Vista 7 years ago, I believed he could take the company further. But power had changed him. Cold, calculating, willing to sacrifice everything to win. I forwarded the data to Henry with a short message. "I've got the first piece." He replied a few minutes later, "You'll need more. Find someone who can confirm it." I thought of Liam Torres, the lead data engineer Nathan had forced out for being a poor cultural fit. I still had his number. When I called, he picked up after 2 rings. His voice was hoarse but calm. "I knew you'd call one day." I asked, "Do you still have the old analytics backups?" "I need to cross-check the current reports." He was silent for a moment before answering. "I do. And I've got a few things you'll want to see." We set a time to meet the next day. When I hung up, I stood by the window, staring down at the traffic below, my chest heavy but steady. I didn't know exactly what I was walking into, but I knew one thing. If I did nothing, everything my father built would vanish into the hands of a man who equated success with deception. The wind from the bay swept in, carrying the chill and the salt. I closed my eyes, listening to the city's constant hum, and heard my father's voice in my mind. Sometimes, to protect what's right, you have to be willing to become the storm. I opened my eyes, looked at my reflection in the glass, and whispered under my breath, "Nathan, you don't know me yet." I met Liam at a small cafe tucked down an alley in Soma where we used to spend hours talking about ideas Nathan always dismissed. He was the same man, worn coat, set jaw, bright eyes that never stopped scanning for danger. When I reached the table, he nodded once. No need to ask why I'd called. He had guessed. "I kept a full copy of the entire data system before I left the company," he said plainly, his voice low and steady. I knew something was wrong. "They altered the numbers, not just for investor reports, but to hide transfers." I looked around and asked softly, "Can you prove it?" He pulled a small hard drive from his bag. "It's all here. But I can't access the internal system to confirm. I've been locked out for ages. You need someone on the inside." The first name that came to my mind was Harper. The second, and more troubling, was Noah Green, the internal auditor. Young, eager, always angling for attention. I'd never fully trusted him, but right now, he was our only option. That night, I contacted Harper first. She agreed to help, but sounded cautious. "Nathan is watching everything," she said. "You have no idea. He even installed internal tracking software." I replied, "I know, so we need someone who knows the audit system, Noah." 3 days later, we met at Harper's apartment. The blinds were closed, and the room smelled of takeout and late-night coffee. 3 laptops sat open on the table among piles of paperwork. Liam faced me, Harper was logging into HR, and Noah arrived late, jittery. "Do you really want to do this?" Noah asked when he walked in. I looked at him, calm. "I don't want to," I said. "But if we don't, everything my father built will be sold to Vectra, and people here will lose their jobs." Noah hesitated, then sat down. "I'll help," he said, "but only if there's real evidence. I don't want to be dragged into a personal vendetta." I smiled. "Fine. I don't need blind loyalty. I just need accuracy." Over the next 2 weeks, we gathered data in secret. Harper pulled HR reports, Liam cross-checked server logs, and Noah combed through audit files. Each of us handled a separate thread, so if one part got exposed, the rest stayed safe. Things went more smoothly than I'd expected. One evening, while we were working at Harper's, Liam found a strange file in the financial data set, Consulting Fund X09. He opened it, and the room went quiet. Dozens of approved transfers bore Nathan's signature, routed to shell companies that did not exist. The total ran into the tens of millions. "He's bleeding the company dry," Harper said, her face pale. "And using that money to dress up the books for the sale," I said. We immediately backed everything up and encrypted it. But the next day, Noah began acting off. He avoided my eyes, his phone was frequently off, and whenever Harper asked a question, he answered curtly. I understood at once. Nathan had probably reached him. That night, I texted Noah privately. "We need to meet," I wrote. He replied, "I'm busy." I sent another message. 10 minutes, I need to verify audit data." He went silent. A cold knot of unease started to form. Harper noticed before I did. "I'm not sure we can trust him," she said. "Yesterday I saw Noah talking to the CFO. Maybe a coincidence, but I don't do coincidences anymore." I sighed. "I know. But we can't cut him out yet. If we act too suddenly, Nathan will smell something." The following 3 days, none of us slept well. We worked in silence and used encrypted channels. Liam grew increasingly tense. Harper suspected she was being watched. I found myself staring at Nathan's old terse emails to me, short, clinical, now reading like a dare. Then Harper sent one short message. He knows. I asked who. She replied, Nathan. I just saw him leave the meeting room with Noah, and he was smiling. I understood immediately what that meant. Even if Noah hadn't openly betrayed us yet, Nathan had sensed the danger. I knew he would act soon, and when he did, we had to be ready. I called Henry that night and told him everything. He listened, then said something I would never forget. Amelia, real power does not live in what you hold, but in how you make them believe you do not. Let him grow confident. The arrogant always open the door for an opponent to walk through. I sat alone a long time after the call ended. Outside my window, San Francisco was unusually still, and a single ambulance siren rolled in the distance. Inside me, worry and resolve are braided together. The storm was forming, and soon it would strike at the heart of Vista Dynamics. Before I slept, I got a message from Harper. I uploaded the first file to a secure cloud, she wrote. But one thing, someone on the team is no longer with us. I stared at the screen and my heart sank. I knew exactly who she meant, and I knew if Nathan truly knew, this game would leave no room for mistakes. I closed the laptop and told myself, all right, Nathan, if you want to fight, you'll get one. But this time, I will not be the passive one. The news broke just 2 days later. Across major tech outlets, one headline spread on Monday morning. Former Vista Dynamics Strategy Director under investigation for internal data tampering. A photo of me, cropped from last year's conference, appeared beside Nathan's, my serious face now framed next to his polished smile. Under the caption, Vista CEO speaks out on acts of sabotage. I read the article in the dark apartment, the only light coming from my laptop. Each sentence was a carefully sharpened blade, never outright accusing, but heavily implying that I was behind the system breach that shut down the company overnight. Beneath it was Nathan's quoted statement. We regret that some individuals cannot accept change, but at Vista, professional integrity will always come first. I laughed quietly. He moved faster than I expected. My phone rang. It was Harper, her voice trembling. They're investigating the system. It says they found a strange login, same IP as your old office. I didn't do that. I know. But what about Noah? I said nothing. That question was the one I feared most. Noah, the man who had avoided me all week and suddenly vanished from every channel. I knew then Nathan wasn't just suspicious. He knew. And he was using Noah as the blade. By afternoon, Henry called, his tone grave. Amelia, I just received word. They've filed a complaint with the Securities Commission accusing you of unauthorized data access. So he wants to turn me into a criminal? Exactly. And if you react now, you'll fall right into his trap. Let him feel safe a little longer. When the call ended, I sat in silence. I wasn't afraid of losing my name. I was afraid of the people who trusted me being dragged into this war. Harper texted. They called me into HR, asked about you. I said I knew nothing, but I don't think they believe me. I replied simply, thank you. Don't do anything else. That night, I went to the old pier, the place I always went when I needed to think. The sea was black, the wind cold, the air thick with salt. I opened my phone and read Liam's message. The data's locked. Someone wiped all the backup copies from the servers. Almost everything we'd worked for was gone. But then Henry's words echoed in my mind. Power needs patience. I took a long breath. If Nathan thought he had won, let him think so. The more confident he became, the more exposed he would be. The next morning, Nathan appeared on live television. He wore a gray suit, his voice smooth, his smile practiced. The recent incident was caused by a few former employees interfering with the system, but we have the situation under control. Vista is moving forward. I watched the whole broadcast, hand tightening around my coffee cup. He lied flawlessly, but I noticed one small detail. Behind him on the studio screen was the Vectra logo, the company set to buy Vista. He wasn't defending himself. He was selling what didn't belong to him. I sent the video clip to Henry. He replied almost instantly, "Good. We need more proof that he's misleading investors. Once we have that, we can block the deal." I met Harper and Liam at her apartment again. She looked exhausted, eyes dark from sleepless nights. Liam was furious. "Noah betrayed us," he said. "I checked the access logs. He uploaded the encrypted files straight to Nathan's system." Harper slammed her hand on the table. "I trusted him." I didn't blame them. In the game of power, loyalty is the rarest currency. "We stop," I said. "What?" Liam nearly shouted. "After everything he's done?" "Not forever," I said calmly. "Just for now. Let him think we've given up. When things quiet down, we'll strike from where he least expects." Harper looked at me, slowly understanding. "What are you planning, Amelia?" I turned toward the window, preparing for the shareholders' meeting. For the next week, I disappeared from every channel. No emails, no calls, no social media. The media speculated wildly. Amelia Cross goes silent after sabotage allegations. I ignored it. I needed the quiet. The storm is always most dangerous when it pauses. I spent my days rewriting everything, every data line, every proof copy, every transaction Nathan had signed. Each file was stored safely in 2 separate accounts, neither traceable to my name. I sent the first batch to Henry. He called after reading it. "This is it," he said. "Exactly what we need. Are you ready?" "I've always been ready, Henry," I said. "It just wasn't time yet." A week passed. The Vectra deal dominated every headline. Nathan appeared at events, praised as the golden man of Silicon Valley. And me, I watched quietly from the shadows, waiting for the moment he'd feel untouchable. Because that would be the moment he'd lose everything. On Friday night, I sent Henry one message: "It's time." He replied within seconds. "Understood. I'll arrange the shareholders' meeting for Tuesday." I stared at the screen, calm as ever. Nathan thought he'd destroyed me, but all he'd done was build the stage I was about to step onto. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, closing my eyes. My father's face appeared in my mind, his warm, steady smile. "Now you understand why I said to wait for the right moment, don't you, Amelia?" I nodded in the silence and whispered, "Yes, Father. It's time for me to come back." Tuesday morning. The air was cold and damp, the scent of morning mist blending with the smell of coffee drifting up from the street below. I woke earlier than usual, showered in cold water, then stood silently before the mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who'd walked out of that building a year ago. Her eyes were steady now, stripped of fear, focused only on what came next. I slipped on a black suit, tied my hair neatly, fastened my father's old watch to my wrist, and stepped out the door. The Vista Dynamics tower rose ahead, tall and unyielding against the gray San Francisco sky. It had been a year since I'd last set foot inside, and this morning I was coming back, not as the employee they fired, but as the one who owned it. Henry had arranged everything. The special shareholders meeting was set for 10 a.m. Nathan believed it was just a closed session to finalize the sale to Vectra. He didn't know that, on paper, the person holding 90% of the votes was me. I arrived 10 minutes early. The old receptionist looked up, startled, then forced a hesitant smile. "Ms. Cross, I thought—" "It's all right," I said calmly. "I have a meeting with the board." She nodded quickly and said nothing more. I stepped into the elevator, watching the numbers climb, my heartbeat slow but steady. When the doors opened, Henry was waiting in the hallway. He wore a gray suit and carried a leather portfolio. "They've started," he said quietly. I nodded. "Good. Let them finish talking." From behind the glass doors came Nathan's voice, confident, controlled, the same voice that had once dismissed me. "Vectra is submitting its final offer. If we agree today, the acquisition will be complete within 2 weeks." A few polite claps followed, chairs scraping. Henry gave a subtle nod. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The room fell silent. Every head turned. Nathan stood at the head of the table, his face flashing from shock to that careful, practiced smile. "Amelia," he said evenly, "I think you're in the wrong room. This meeting is for board members only. I walked to the table and set Henry's leather folder down on the polished wood. Good, I said, because I am the board. The room froze. Henry opened his case, pulled out a stack of certified documents, and slid them toward Nathan. These are the verified papers confirming Ms. Cross's legal ownership, he said. According to the trust established by the late chairman Edward Cross, 90% of Vista Dynamics now belongs to her. One of the board members leaned forward, flipping through the pages. His voice cracked slightly. God, is this real? Henry nodded. All verified, notarized, and updated to the shareholder registry this morning. Nathan stood motionless for several seconds. I saw the confusion flicker in his eyes before it turned to fury. Then he laughed, a short, hollow sound. This is a joke. Another one of your schemes? No, I said calmly. It's the truth you never cared to learn. I opened the second folder and spread the pages across the table. And this is the independent audit report on your financial operations, phantom transactions, fake consulting funds, unrecorded payments. The room shifted. Heads bent forward. I heard low murmurs, fingers tracing over familiar company names and impossible numbers. Nathan's voice wavered. Where did you get this? You hacked my system? I met his eyes. I didn't need to hack it. I had access. Silence settled thick and heavy. I let it linger before speaking again, slow and deliberate. You fired me because you thought I was useless. But you forgot this company carries my father's name, and I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to clean up the mess you made. Henry handed another document to the board secretary. By the authority of the majority shareholder, Ms. Cross requests an immediate vote for the removal of Mr. Nathan Cole from the position of Chief Executive Officer. Nathan turned sharply toward him. You can't do that. It requires at least 2/3 board approval, Henry interrupted, his tone calm. Not when she holds 90%. That is the majority. The truth hit him like a wall. His face flushed red, his hands clenched. He looked at me, voice trembling. You planned this from the start. I shook my head. No, you planned it for me. I just waited for the right time. From the far end of the table, Dalton, one of my father's oldest allies, spoke in his low, steady tone. By company statute, the motion takes effect immediately upon confirmation from the majority shareholder. He looked at me. Would you like to sign, Ms. Cross? I took the pen and signed. A clean, deliberate stroke. Nathan stared at the paper, his expression a mix of hatred and disbelief. His voice dropped to a whisper. Was this revenge? I looked at him, calm and unshaken. No, this is justice. Henry gestured toward the security guards. No one said another word. Nathan stood still for a moment, then walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. Quiet. Final. I inhaled deeply. The tension in the room seemed to dissolve. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass panels, spilling across the table. Dalton looked at me and nodded once. Welcome back, Amelia Cross. I smiled, a real smile, the first in months. Not of victory, but of belonging. I gathered the papers and spoke clearly, my voice steady. I didn't come here to take anyone's place. I came to restore what Vista once stood for: trust, people, and truth. From today on, we start over. The room stayed silent for a beat, then filled with soft murmurs of agreement. I knew this wasn't the end of the battle, but this morning I had reclaimed what mattered most. Not power, but my voice. As I left the room, Henry walked beside me. Your father would be proud, Amelia, he said softly. I looked at him and smiled. I hope so. But we still have work to do. I don't just want the company to survive. I want it to live the way he dreamed it could. Henry nodded. Then let's begin. We stepped into the long corridor, bathed in noon light, reflections glinting off the marble floor. I paused for a moment, looking back at the closed door behind us, the same one I had once walked through in defeat. Now I was back, not for revenge, but to rebuild in my own way. After Nathan was escorted out of the boardroom, I stood still for a long moment. No one said a word. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. There was no applause, no congratulations, only the heavy silence of people who had just witnessed a change too sudden and too vast to process. My heart beat slowly, heavily. There was no thrill of triumph, only something deeper, relief. Henry stood beside me, still holding the signed documents. He spoke softly. "We should stay to finalize the paperwork." I nodded. A moment later, Dalton, the oldest member of the board, who had worked with my father for years, cleared his throat, breaking the silence. His voice was rough but steady. "By regulation, the board requires a temporary executive. I propose Ms. Cross take the position until a formal decision is made." No one objected. A few exchanged glances, then nodded. Henry placed the appointment document before me, and I signed it. As the pen touched the final line, I understood that from this moment on, I was officially the head of Vista Dynamics, the company my father built, and the one Nathan had just been forced to leave. When the others filed out, I remained with Henry. He said, "We should announce this soon, before rumors spread." I replied, "Announce it, but quietly. I want them to see results before they hear the story." Henry smiled faintly. "Just like your father." I stepped into the hallway. Through the glass panels, I saw Nathan standing in the main lobby, surrounded by reporters. Flashbulbs went off in rapid bursts. I stopped to watch. He was speaking in that calm, confident tone I'd heard 100 times before at press conferences. "The company is in a transition period," Nathan said. "There's been some misunderstanding. I remain the legal CEO until the court rules otherwise. This is a deliberate attempt to seize control." A female reporter asked, "Do you have any proof, Mr. Cole?" He smiled lightly and glanced toward where I stood. "I'll present it soon. The truth always comes out." I watched and knew Nathan had never learned how to lose. He was doing what he did best, controlling the narrative. The power was gone, but he still had the media, and he knew how to use it to cast doubt. Back in the boardroom, Henry was sorting documents. "He's stirring things up again, isn't he?" he asked. "He is," I said. "He's chosen the public route." Henry's voice hardened. "We can counter that. The media still listens to those who tell the truth." "Not yet," I said, shaking my head. "I don't need to argue. I'll let action and numbers speak for me." By late afternoon, all the legal steps were complete. Nathan was officially removed as CEO. The filings had been submitted to the stock exchange, but I knew he wouldn't stop. I returned to my old office. Everything looked the same, except for the missing nameplate. I picked it up, wiped the thin layer of dust, and set it back on the desk. The afternoon sunlight poured through the window, casting a pale gold glow across the room. I remembered my father sitting there years ago, his voice echoing in my mind. "Power isn't meant to prove who's stronger. It's meant to prove who's right." When I opened my laptop, my inbox was overflowing. Some messages congratulated me, some tried to reconnect, and others were merely curious. But one name caught my eye: Nathan Cole. I opened it. There was only one line: "You think you've won? Let's see who keeps the trust longer." I stared at the words, then smiled faintly. He still didn't understand. I never cared about winning. All I cared about was keeping this company true to what my father built it to be. The next morning, the media erupted with the story of the transition. Some headlines praised the rightful heir's return, while others suggested I had succeeded on the Cross name alone. I read them all without reaction. Words couldn't shake me now. Henry called, his tone firm. "Let them talk. The truth will quiet them soon enough." I held my first internal meeting with the remaining department heads. Some watched me with caution, others with curiosity, but none with defiance. I laid out my plan: a full audit, the end of the culture of fear, and the restoration of trust among employees. When I finished, the room was silent for a few seconds. Then Harper, my steadfast ally, spoke. "She's right. It's time we start over." One by one, the others nodded. I looked around the room and saw something shift in their eyes. The doubt wasn't gone, but for the first time, there was a flicker of hope. That evening, I stood alone before the tall office window, looking down at the city. The lights stretched across the horizon like a glowing river. In the reflection, I saw my own face, calm, resolute. I whispered, "You can control the media, Nathan, but I'll let the truth control everything else." I turned off the lights and left the office as the clock struck 11. The wind outside was strong, but it didn't feel cold. For the first time in months, I felt light. Nathan still had his schemes, but I had Henry, Harper, Liam, and most importantly, I had something no one could take away, my father's trust. The battle in the boardroom was over, but the fight for Vista's soul had only just begun. And this time, I wasn't the one being pushed out. I was the one leading its rebirth. A week after Nathan's dismissal, the air inside the company was still tense. Rumors moved faster than any official memo. People whispered in the hallways, gossiped over coffee in the lobby. But whenever I walked by, silence fell. Their eyes followed me, curious, wary, uncertain. I didn't blame them. To most, I was just the founder's daughter, the woman who appeared out of nowhere, toppled the CEO, and claimed the top seat. I understood that trust couldn't be inherited. It had to be rebuilt, piece by piece. And I knew that work had to start now. On my first morning as official CEO, I walked into the same boardroom where I'd been fired just a week before. Inside, the department heads sat in silence, tension so thick I could hear pens tapping against paper. I stood at the head of the table, set my folder down, and spoke slowly. I'm not here to talk about the past. We all know what happened. I'm here to talk about what comes next. Starting today, we begin again. Not as victims of old mistakes, but as people given a second chance to do things right. No one spoke, but a few expressions began to soften. I opened the folder and introduced the plan I called the Human First Initiative. Its purpose was simple: to put people back at the center of every decision. I talked about restructuring HR, implementing transparent evaluations, and rehiring the talented employees who'd been pushed out simply for disagreeing with the old leadership. Harper was the first to speak. If you can actually do what you said today, Amelia, I believe this company can still be saved. Liam nodded. And I'm ready to return to the engineering floor, if you want me to rebuild the old product team. I looked at both of them and smiled softly. I don't just want you, I need you. We worked for hours that day. When the meeting ended, a few people stayed behind to ask questions. Someone said quietly, I've never seen a meeting where the CEO listened this much. I answered, I don't need obedience. I need honesty. The following days blurred into a series of endless conversations. I visited every floor, sat with employees, asked what they needed, what had exhausted them, and what had once made them love their work. Some were surprised, some were hesitant, and others didn't believe I truly wanted to listen. But little by little, they began to talk. I heard stories of unfair promotions, ignored ideas, and people who'd left because they felt invisible. I wrote everything down. Each story was another piece of the puzzle Nathan had broken. When night came, I stayed alone in my office. The whiteboard in front of me was covered in messy notes. Restructure, fairness, transparency, creativity. I knew I was heading in the right direction, but I also knew it wouldn't be easy. I'd reclaim the company, but to win back the hearts of the people inside it, I would have to prove it, through action. Then came the first challenge. One of Vista's major investors, Axton Capital, requested an emergency meeting. They doubted my capability and wanted proof that I deserved the position, not just the cross name. The meeting took place in a glass-walled room on the top floor. The Axton representative, a sharp-eyed man named Richard Tanaka, looked at me coldly. Ms. Cross, he said, we respect your father's legacy, but investors care about returns. What proof do you have that under your leadership, Vista will grow, and not just survive on its past? I didn't answer right away. I opened my laptop and displayed the prototype Liam's team and I had been developing, a transparent, ethics-driven AI platform built to restore accountability. We're not chasing what's fastest, I said. We're building what's most trustworthy, and trust, Mr. Tanaka, is the longest-lasting form of profit. The room went silent. Tanaka studied me for a moment, then nodded slightly. We'll see. You have 6 months. After that meeting, I threw myself into work. I stayed in the office until midnight most nights, running tests with the engineers, reviewing code line by line, adjusting every minor detail. We wanted to build the first AI system that could explain and take responsibility for its decisions, something Nathan had once called a waste of time. 3 months later, we finished it. We called it Lucid, an ethics-centered AI system. On launch day, the press filled the atrium. There were no grand displays, no flashy slogans, just me standing before the cameras, saying quietly, "We don't build artificial intelligence to replace people. We build it to help people make better choices." The speech spread quickly. The same outlets that had doubted me now changed their tone, calling Lucid a human milestone in technology. Vista's reputation rose again, the stock price climbed, and more importantly, the company's spirit began to breathe once more. One evening, as I passed the engineering wing, I saw something written on the whiteboard in blue marker. "She didn't come back for power. She came back for us." Beneath the line were dozens of signatures. I stood there for a long time, feeling warmth in my chest. When I returned to my office, Harper was waiting by the door. She smiled. "See, Amelia? They believe now." I smiled back. "They don't believe in me, Harper. They believe Vista can be better." She nodded, and in that moment, I realized perhaps that was the real victory. Not the CEO title, not the shares, but bringing back the faith of those who had been forgotten. Outside the glass, the sunset stretched over the skyline. I stood still, watching the sun slip beneath the horizon, calm and steady. And for the first time, I truly understood what my father meant when he said, "Power isn't what you hold, it's what you use to lift others." And I knew this was only the beginning. A year after I officially took over Vista Dynamics, the company had changed so much that even I could hardly believe it was the same place. The cold, fearful silence that once haunted its hallways was gone. The glass walls that used to mirror tense faces now reflected laughter and the hum of late-night collaboration. Every morning, when I walked through the lobby, employees greeted me with easy smiles, no longer the cautious glances of a workforce on edge. The faces that once looked down whenever the old CEO passed now met mine, confident and unafraid. I could see it, the light in their eyes again, the light of people who believed. I kept my promise to them. Every department had been rebuilt around human value, fair reward systems, open discussions across teams, and the People First initiative had turned ideals into reality. Our first quarterly report under the new structure didn't just hold steady, it grew by 18%, a number that surprised everyone, including me. That afternoon, Harper and I were reviewing the data when she grinned. "If Nathan saw this, he'd lose his mind." I laughed. "He's probably far away by now." Harper paused, her tone softening. "Do you ever think you'll forgive him?" I stayed quiet for a moment. Forgive. That word still felt heavy. Finally, I said, "I don't need to forgive Harper. I just need to make sure he can't hurt anyone again. That's enough." A week later, an invitation arrived, the National Technology Leadership Conference, honoring top executives from across the country. Vista had been nominated for Most Human-Centered Innovation. I hesitated before accepting, not because I was afraid, but because I knew who else would be there. Nathan. The conference was held in Los Angeles. When I stepped onto the stage to present our AI platform, Lucid, I spotted him sitting in the middle row, quiet, composed, unreadable. He wasn't the commanding CEO surrounded by an entourage anymore, just a man who once had everything and lost it. When my presentation ended, the audience rose to their feet in applause. I bowed slightly, then saw Nathan approaching. His eyes no longer held arrogance, only a weary calm. He said quietly, just loud enough for me to hear, "You did what I never thought possible. Congratulations, Amelia." I smiled gently, no bitterness, no triumph. "No one builds an empire on power alone, Nathan. It has to be built on trust." He nodded once, a faint sadness in his eyes, then turned away. I watched him go, feeling no anger. Maybe, somewhere in him, a part of the man he used to be remained. But that no longer concerned me. I had moved far beyond that chapter. When I returned to San Francisco, I went straight to the office. Harper, Liam, and the technical team were waiting in the conference room. They brought up the latest quarterly results on the screen: revenue growth of 34%, employee satisfaction at a record 91, and new investors lining up to partner with us. Liam smiled. "We did it, Amelia." I looked around the room that had once symbolized control and fear. Now it pulsed with energy and laughter. "Not me," I said. "Us. This is what Vista was always meant to be." The room fell quiet for a moment, then someone started clapping, and soon the applause spread, warm and genuine. After the meeting, I stayed behind. On the desk sat an old photo. My father and I on the day Vista opened its first branch. He wore a gray suit. I was just a little girl with a ponytail, smiling brightly beside him. I placed my hand on the frame and whispered, "You see this, Dad? I kept what you built, but this time it's not just for me." That evening, I walked the corridors. Lights still glowed in many offices. I could hear laughter and spirited discussion from the engineering wing. People were staying late, not because they feared their boss, but because they loved their work. I slowed my steps, feeling the warmth of a place that had once broken me. Before leaving, I stopped at the front entrance and looked up at the glowing Vista logo on the glass wall. It wasn't just a symbol anymore, it was a legacy. My father's, the team's, and even the failures that had shaped me. "They once thought I was fired because I wasn't good enough," I murmured. But that's what led me to find my purpose. Outside, the bay wind blew hard, carrying the chill of salt and fog. I took a deep breath and stepped out, a calm smile on my face. I knew this journey wasn't over, but now I wasn't the defeated one. I was the one leading the way. And in that moment, I finally understood what my father had meant all along. Power isn't about the seat you hold. It's about how you use it to light the way for others. That was the true victory. And it was also the beginning of a new chapter, one where Vista was no longer the empire of a single man, but the home of hundreds of people continuing the dream my father left behind.